One shortcut taken, one warning ignored, one decision pushed too far. That's all it took to turn 5 ordinary moments into fatal outcomes. These cases became cautionary examples of how stupid, avoidable decisions can end lives where nothing had to go wrong. It was May 21st, 2017, before sunrise in Cappadocia, Turkey, as multiple commercial hot air balloons lifted off using brief burner bursts for a routine sightseeing flight in cold morning air. Among the passengers was Sarah Petrov, 26 years old, visiting from Plovdiv, Bulgaria, accompanied by her fiancé, James Mitchell, 29. Sarah worked as an office administrator and had saved for more than a year for the trip. It was her first time traveling far outside Eastern Europe. The flight was planned to celebrate their engagement. Friends later said she was careful in daily life and planned trips closely. She liked documenting travel with photos and short videos. The balloon ride was intended to be a routine highlight of the trip. The night before the flight, the couple decided to film a celebratory clip for their engagement. They packed a cheap handheld sparkler purchased online, assuming it was harmless because it burned briefly. They never tested it or considered where it would be used. At the launch site, crews completed final preparations and delivered a standard safety briefing to passengers, including warnings against smoking or bringing open flames near the basket or burner. After liftoff, the balloon climbed steadily as the pilot used short, controlled burner bursts to maintain altitude. Approximately 20 minutes into the flight, Sarah moved closer to the edge of the basket. She removed a small handheld sparkler from her pocket, while another passenger positioned a phone to record her and her fiancé, James. Sarah kept her arm lowered near the basket rim as she prepared to light it, remaining within the confined space beneath the burner assembly. When the sparkler ignited, it emitted a steady stream of sparks. As Sarah kept it low inside the basket, sparks came into direct contact with the skirt area above the basket as the pilot activated the burner to adjust altitude. A brief ignition occurred as sparks from the lit sparkler contacted the skirt area of the envelope. A flash followed, and heat spread rapidly across the lower portion of the fabric. The pilot shut off the burner immediately, but the damage had already compromised the balloon's ability to retain hot air. Lift began to drop unevenly. As heated air escaped, the balloon descended faster than intended and started to tilt. The pilot attempted to stabilize the descent, but control was limited as the envelope continued losing temperature and lift. The basket struck an open field at speed, bounced once, and tipped sharply. The impact threw passengers against the metal frame as the basket continued moving. During the collapse, Sarah lost her footing near the edge. James reached toward her, but the momentum of the basket prevented him from maintaining his grip. Sarah was ejected from the basket and struck the ground beside it as the structure came to rest. Emergency responders reached the landing site shortly after the crash. Sarah Petrov was pronounced dead at the scene. Her fiancé, James Mitchell, survived with minor injuries and was treated by medical personnel. Other passengers inside the basket sustained non-life-threatening injuries and were released after evaluation. Investigators later confirmed there was no mechanical failure. The balloon, burner, and fuel systems were operating as designed. The official finding concluded that a handheld sparkler introduced by a passenger came into direct contact with the skirt area of the envelope, igniting the fabric and causing rapid loss of lift, followed by an uncontrolled landing. Flights across the region were temporarily suspended for safety reviews. When operations resumed, operators implemented additional bag checks, banned celebratory items, and revised safety briefings to emphasize that even small ignition sources pose serious risks inside a hot air balloon. And the next story doesn't involve height or fire at all. It unfolds quietly around a dinner table where politeness and restraint turned out to be just as deadly. It was December 18th, 2018, inside a private apartment in Kyoto, Japan, where former colleagues gathered for a small reunion that extended late into the night. One of the friends present was Kenji Morita, 58 years old. He lived alone and had been struggling financially since retiring from his teaching post, relying on limited savings and occasional tutoring work. He had hesitated to attend the reunion, uncertain about how he would compare to others, but decided to go anyway. Friends described him as stubborn and quietly competitive, often turning small situations into tests of endurance or self-control rather than admitting difficulty or backing down. As the evening continued, drinks were served steadily. Friends talked about work, promotions, health, and how far everyone had come since they last met. Kenji grew quieter as the conversation shifted, listening as others compared careers and milestones. Some excused themselves to use the bathroom, and after a while, people casually mentioned how many times they had gone, folding it into the ongoing conversation. Kenji mentioned that he had not used the bathroom at all. The comment drew brief attention, and the idea settled into an informal challenge without further discussion. Kenji decided to stay seated and did not get up again. As the night continued, friends stood, moved around the apartment, and excused themselves as needed. Kenji remained in his chair. When someone asked if he was all right, he nodded and said he was fine. A friend suggested he take a break or stretch, but Kenji declined and stayed seated. Over time, his posture began to change. He shifted in his chair, crossed and uncrossed his legs, and leaned forward before sitting upright again. At one point, he stood part way as if preparing to walk toward the bathroom, then stopped. After a brief pause, he sat back down, appearing to decide against it. Kenji continued to involve himself in conversation, turning toward different friends and asking questions, keeping himself engaged. Drinks were still being poured, and without drawing attention to it, he continued drinking along with the others despite no longer appearing comfortable. By that point, Kenji had gone more than 6 hours without urinating since the evening began. His breathing grew shallow, and his face appeared pale under the apartment lights. A friend told him it was not a real challenge and that it was fine to stand up, but Kenji shook his head and remained seated. Near the end of the gathering, as dishes were cleared and tea was served, Kenji stood up abruptly. The movement was stiff and unsteady. He took one step away from the table and stopped. His body tensed, and he collapsed forward onto the floor. Friends rushed to him and called emergency services immediately. Kenji was briefly responsive before becoming unresponsive. Paramedics arrived and initiated resuscitation efforts, but his condition continued to deteriorate during transport. At the hospital, doctors confirmed that Kenji died from cardiac arrest triggered by prolonged voluntary urinary retention. Medical findings showed extreme bladder distension, worsened by alcohol intake, and an undiagnosed prostate condition. Physicians concluded that while the collapse appeared sudden, the physiological damage had been building steadily throughout the night. In the days that followed, friends expressed shock at how quickly the situation escalated. Several said they had assumed Kenji would stop once it became uncomfortable. Doctors later noted that prolonged urinary retention is a medical emergency that can lead to life-threatening complications, particularly in middle-aged men with underlying conditions. Kenji's death showed how a bad decision can look calm and controlled. The next story moves to an industrial setting, where confidence led to a far more immediate and violent mistake. It was February 11, 2016, in an industrial suburb on the western edge of São Paulo, Brazil. The neighborhood was built around warehouses, loading docks, and small rental units stacked close together. Most people there worked night shifts. By the time the sun came up, the streets were quiet again, littered with delivery pallets and the smell of fuel and solvents hanging in the air. Renato Silva was 34 years old and worked as a forklift operator at a logistics warehouse that handled construction supplies and industrial chemicals. He lived alone nearby and kept to himself, rarely socializing after shifts. Co-workers said he avoided doctors and preferred fixing problems on his own. Some had seen him inhale solvent fumes after work, believing it helped him relax. He also relied on workarounds, using industrial materials for personal needs instead of safer options. Later that morning, Renato met with a woman he had been seeing casually. They returned to his apartment after breakfast. According to her later account, the situation was unplanned and informal. When the moment came, Renato realized he did not have protection. She suggested waiting or stopping, but Renato told her he had a solution. He went into the bathroom and returned with a small container of industrial adhesive he had taken from work. The adhesive was designed for bonding metal and plastic parts under high stress. The label warned against skin contact and listed severe chemical burn risks. Renato appeared unconcerned. He told her it would act as a barrier and that it would dry fast. She later said she hesitated, but Renato seemed confident, almost dismissive of the danger. He had used strong chemicals before and believed he understood how they worked. Within seconds of application, the adhesive began to harden. Unlike consumer glue, it cured rapidly and reacted with moisture and heat. Renato immediately complained of intense burning. The adhesive bonded to his skin, sealing tightly and restricting blood flow. When he tried to remove it, the material had already set. Any movement caused more pain. His partner rushed him to the sink and tried washing it off with water, then soap, but the adhesive did not dissolve. Instead, the water accelerated the chemical reaction. Renato's pain escalated quickly. His skin began to blister beneath the hardened layer. He became pale and started sweating heavily. Within minutes, he was shaking. His breathing became shallow and rapid. Investigators later stated that the adhesive caused severe chemical burns and vascular damage, triggering an extreme stress response and rapid onset of shock. His partner tried calling a friend for advice, then searched online for removal methods, but nothing worked. Attempts to pry the material loose only caused more injury. Within the hour, Renato collapsed onto the floor. He was conscious but disoriented, struggling to speak clearly. His pulse was weak, and his skin felt cold despite the earlier burning. The hardened adhesive restricted circulation, while the severe burns and pain triggered a rapidly developing shock response. By the time emergency services were contacted, Renato's condition had deteriorated rapidly. He was transported to a nearby hospital, where he died later that day. The cause of death was determined to be acute shock and cardiovascular failure, resulting from severe chemical burns, vascular compromise, and extreme physiological stress. Investigators noted that the adhesive was never intended for contact with human skin, and that its chemical properties made removal extremely difficult once bonded. The woman who had been with Renato was interviewed by authorities and was not found to have contributed to the incident. Investigators concluded that the decision to use the adhesive was made by Renato alone. In the days that followed, Renato's workplace conducted an internal review. The adhesive he had used was removed from open storage and placed behind locked access, requiring supervisor approval. Safety briefings were updated to emphasize the risks of chemical misuse, even outside of work tasks. Co-workers later expressed disbelief when they learned how the adhesive had been used. Several said Renato was known for improvising, but no one imagined he would apply industrial chemicals to his own body. There was no broader public campaign, no viral footage, and no widespread media attention. Enjoying the story so far? If you want to keep watching ordinary moments turn fatal, consider subscribing so you don't miss what comes next. It was July 29, 2018, on an interstate outside Dallas, Texas. Night traffic moved steadily beneath a series of low concrete overpasses designed for commercial vehicles. Conditions were normal. The roadway was dry, visibility was clear, and vehicles traveled at typical highway speeds. Tyler Brooks was 21 years old. He worked short-term warehouse jobs, loading and unloading freight when shifts were available. Friends described him as restless and focused on gaining attention online. He recorded frequent videos, workouts, stunts, and improvised challenges, most of which never made it past his phone. People close to him said he believed one striking clip could bring attention or opportunity without planning or preparation. That night, Tyler met two friends after work. One was a semi-truck driver for a small local operator and had access to the vehicle after hours. The other followed in a compact car. According to later statements, the idea developed casually. Tyler wanted footage that appeared extreme. Standing on top of the moving truck was mentioned and immediately accepted. No one measured bridge clearance, discussed speed, or considered how quickly the situation could become uncontrollable. After traffic thinned, the truck entered the interstate and settled into the right lane at highway speed. The car followed several vehicle lengths behind with a phone camera recording. Tyler climbed using the side steps and mirror supports and pulled himself onto the roof of the cab. Once upright, the wind affected his balance immediately. From the trailing car, he appeared fully exposed, standing without any harness or restraint. Inside the cab, the driver later told investigators he felt a slight change in weight, but did not look upward. His attention remained on traffic ahead. From behind, Tyler stood upright and began moving his arms and shoulders, shifting his stance while facing the camera. Other motorists noticed the figure on the truck. Several slowed briefly, assuming the person was secured or part of a controlled activity. As the truck continued, it passed beneath multiple overpasses. At one point, Tyler bent his knees briefly as a bridge approached, then straightened again once clear. A later review showed that the overpasses along that stretch met standard clearance requirements for vehicles, but left no safe margin for a person standing upright on a cab roof. Several minutes later, the truck approached another overpass. The structure was difficult to distinguish from the dark sky until the vehicle was nearly beneath it. Tyler was still upright, moving his arms and shifting position. There was no indication he saw the overpass or attempted to lower himself in time. At highway speed, his upper body struck the underside of the bridge. Multiple drivers reported hearing a sharp impact distinct from a vehicle collision. Tyler was knocked backward and fell from the truck onto the roadway behind it. Objects believed to be personal items scattered across the lane as traffic began braking. The truck continued forward for several seconds before the driver felt a jolt and noticed the following car swerving. He pulled onto the shoulder just past the overpass. Behind him, vehicles slowed abruptly. Drivers activated hazard lights and stopped at uneven angles as they attempted to avoid the area beneath the bridge. Tyler lay motionless on the asphalt. Due to traffic conditions and uncertainty about what had fallen, no one approached immediately. Multiple motorists contacted emergency services, reporting that a person standing on a moving truck had struck an overpass and fallen onto the road. Responders shut down lanes and reached Tyler within minutes. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The cause of death was determined to be massive blunt force trauma resulting from the bridge impact and subsequent fall onto the roadway. Investigators examined the truck, bridge, and roadway and found no mechanical or structural failures. Clearance measurements confirmed the overpass met all regulatory standards. The truck was operating normally, and the driver was not exceeding the speed limit. Authorities concluded the incident resulted solely from Tyler's decision to stand on top of a moving vehicle. The driver was questioned and released without charges after investigators found no mechanical failure or intent to cause harm. Partial video clips ended seconds before the impact and were never released. Tyler's death was driven by the need to be seen, risking everything for a clip meant to last seconds. The final story strips away the audience entirely, ending in a quiet room where familiarity, exhaustion, and one careless habit were enough to kill. It was October 3rd, 2015, late at night in Brno, Czech Republic. The chemistry building was nearly empty, classrooms dark and halls quiet. One third-floor study room remained lit, connected directly to a teaching lab. The air smelled of coffee and cleaning solution. 4 exhausted students sat around a cluttered table, studying in a space that had slowly filled with lab equipment, beakers, gloves, and unlabeled containers that no one questioned anymore. One of those students was Marek Novak, 22 years old, an undergraduate chemistry student who lived in the university's lab housing. He was not known for top grades, but he was well-liked during long nights. Classmates described him as someone who broke the tension with jokes and small dares when everyone else was tired. He often turned ordinary moments into distractions, meant to keep people awake. Marek chewed gum constantly. When the flavor faded, he had a habit his classmates had seen many times before. He would dip the gum into citric acid powder to make it sour again. It was a food-grade packet he kept in his bag. Friends told him it was unnecessary and dumb. Marek brushed it off every time, saying he knew what he was doing. The habit became background noise, something people noticed but stopped questioning. That night, the group reviewed notes from a recent lab practical. Marek appeared exhausted, repeatedly rubbing his eyes and struggling to stay focused. Marek reached into his bag, pulled out a piece of gum, unwrapped it, and chewed briefly. Then he stood up and walked toward the shared shelf without announcing what he was doing. No one reacted. This was normal behavior for him. He was looking for his citric acid packet. Instead, he picked up a small plastic container from the shelf. Inside was a fine white powder, dry, odorless. From a few feet away, it looked no different from citric acid or baking powder. The front of the container had no label. On the side was an old strip of tape with writing that had faded and partially peeled off. One student asked what he was using. Marek glanced at the container and dismissed the concern. Another pointed out the risk of unlabeled jars, but Marek laughed it off and proceeded anyway. He did not measure it. He did not read the tape more closely. He dipped the edge of his gum into the powder, tapped off the excess, turned back toward the table, and put it into his mouth. And his reaction was instant. Marek froze as soon as the gum touched his tongue. He stopped chewing, gagged, and spat it onto the floor. His face tightened as he made a sharp choking sound, drawing immediate attention from the other students. He clawed at his mouth as if trying to scrape something off. Saliva poured out as he bent forward, coughing and spitting at the same time. When someone asked if he was okay, he tried to answer but couldn't form words. His breathing became loud and uneven. He stumbled to the sink and began rinsing his mouth repeatedly, shaking his head as if in disbelief. One witness said his lips turned red almost immediately. His face showed pain, not confusion. Another student picked up the container and examined the tape more closely. What little writing remained did not say citric acid. It identified a highly caustic alkaline cleaning reagent used for glassware maintenance, strong enough to cause severe chemical burns on contact. Marek's coughing escalated into strained gasps, and he dropped to one knee beside the sink. Emergency services were contacted, and campus staff arrived within minutes. By the time responders reached him, Marek was on the floor. His breathing was labored and noisy. Swelling from the deep chemical burns inside his mouth and upper airway progressed rapidly, restricting his ability to breathe. Witnesses said his eyes remained open, but his responses slowed and became incoherent. Students tried to keep him upright while explaining what had happened. Emergency crews attempted to manage his airway and stabilize him, but the injury progressed rapidly. Marek died from respiratory failure caused by severe alkali chemical burns to his mouth and upper airway. In the days that followed, the university closed the building temporarily. Shared shelves were cleared, unlabeled containers were removed, new rules banned reagents from study and housing areas, and reinforced labeling requirements. Students who had used the room later said the most disturbing part was how ordinary it all felt until the moment it wasn't. There was no experiment, no explosion, just one habit, one unlabeled container, and a decision made without thinking. Thank you for watching. Like this video? Click here.